Alright, hello YouTube, my name is Karel the King, StanStrength.com. In today's video, we are going to be continuing the Strength series. So in this video, we're going to be talking about why you should not be maxing out every single session. Now, I am a fan of heavy singles. I have done Conjugate for, I think, if I remember correctly, it was about a year. So I did Conjugate for quite a long time, so I have experience with, the max effort method, as well as a lot of the other training methodologies that are associated with the Westside Barbell Conjugate system. So that is why I feel that when I discuss this and talk to a lot of other people who are within that space, it's worth noting because they're typically going to say something like, yeah, but I did Conjugate, or some other thing along those lines, right? So that's why in this video, we're going to be talking about why you should not max out very often. So let's get to it. The first thing that we're gonna talk about is the point of strength training. Now, it's very simple. The strength training just requires you to progressively lift heavier loads. Now, one thing that's really important to take home here is the fact that progressively lifting heavier loads. That means over time, you should be actually lifting more and more weight. That means you not only have to start lifting heavy, you also need to be able to lift heavier. You can't just start with a load that is, it's very hard, it's very heavy, and it's difficult to recover from, and then expect to make progress from there. You just can't do that. The thing that I always want to advocate and be very clear on is the fact that you should always work hard without sacrificing future hard effort. So if you max out, where do you go from there? Like, if you truly go to just a 1 rep max, what do you do the next session? Do you just replicate that? Is that the same thing as progress from session to session? No, that means you're not just strength training, you're just, for a lack of better words, ego lifting. And there's a reason why I don't want to say that, but we'll get into that in another day on another topic. But you're just trying to, get your fix. You're trying to lift heavy without much intention for progress. And that's going to be a hindrance, not a virtue, when it comes to you actually developing into your stronger self. So if you do just go to a 1 rep max, how likely would it be to add a rep next week? If you are truly lifting 100% of your max, would you be able to lift 105% next week, or be able to lift a 1 rep max for 2 reps the next week? No. That is why programming, periodization, and progressions all exist. The idea behind them is for you to run back, pick up speed, weight, strength, mass, so that way when you meet the wall, you're big, strong enough to break through it. I know Alexander Bromley, he used the analogy of a truck. You want to pick up enough speed so that way when you hit the mud, you're able to get through it. And that's the same thing that you want to do with strength training. Now, the thing is, like I said, you still need to lift heavy. You still need to start with a relevant amount of intensity when you first start your training cycle or your training program, but it can't come at the cost of actual progression. You need to be able to accumulate enough hard work to break through these walls and these plateaus, or you have to be able to accumulate enough work so that way the wall is just constantly being pushed out further ahead of you. So that way you're never really reaching a wall, but because you're constantly progressing, you are going to reach milestones and actually make progress over time. That's not going to require you to fully peak. This is usually for a method that I use for a lot of my clients who are more size focused, who I still tell them get brutally strong, borrowing words from Faz Lifts there, but to get really strong on these movements, and whenever they hit PRs, it's a rep PRs. But regardless, they're still getting stronger. So one thing that's really important to understand about maxing out is the fact that it is very fatiguing on the muscles and also on the soft tissues. This is why when you lift heavier loads, you often hear something like, what is it? Like CNS fatigue. It's right there, but I'm trying not to read off slides to you. I've already dealt with enough death by PowerPoint. But anyway, when you are training, CNS fatigue is something that's a bit overstated. Some people put too much stock into it than others. But the thing is, that at the end of the day, when you lift heavy weights, it tires you out more. You have to put exponentially more effort, and also it drains the body much more, the energies that it has, and as well it also puts a lot more beating on the soft tissues, the joints, tendons, connective tissues, than, let's say, submaximal lifting or other variations would usually do. Strength is a very neurological thing. It's not just muscle mass. It's leverages, it's skill, it's technique, but it's also your neurology, so your nervous system. And you can't just keep pushing heavier loads every single time. You need to be able to rotate certain amounts of intensities, exercises, and whatnot if you are actually going to make long-term progress. If you lift heavy all the time with the same movements, you're putting a lot of wear and tear on the body, and that is something that I truly agree with when I started training with a more conjugate-esque style training. Conjugation is really just the rotation of exercises. So the fact, then the idea behind it is, to limit the amount of fatigue you're accumulating. So, if you are coming more so from the, RPD side of things, you might call that SFR, stimulus to fatigue ratio. But essentially, you were just trying to find ways in your program to extend the amount of time you can build your strength. And this is just another tool in that toolbox. Part of the reason why you don't want to just use the same exercises all the time, especially for the same amount of weight, is because you might develop overuse injuries, you might burn out faster, and being under recovered and being injured are going to be the two greatest sinks of progress. Meaning, during the time you're injured, you're not making gains. During the time you're under recovered, you have to spend a lot of time getting yourself back to where you should be just to continue making progress. So you want to limit that. And if you are maxing out, truly maxing out, not going to just a top heavy single, not just going to a like a heavy top set, that's very different. But an actual true 1 rep max effort, every single time you go to the gym, you are not building new strength. Max effort training is not the best for building new strength, in my opinion. Having done it for quite a while, what I have found it to be true is the fact that it really just reveals the strength you've built up in previous cycles. Now, this is not to say that the conjugate system doesn't work, because usually it's like you max out on a variation of the competition lift and then you do bodybuilding work. So your strength gains are usually coming from the bodybuilding work. But the thing is, because you are constantly rotating out exercises, you're not really tracking as closely as you would in other types of programming, you're kind of leaving things up to chance. Essentially, it's kind of like, all right, will these series or list of exercises carry over to my main lift? You're not going to see that, or you're not going to get feedback for that until maybe 6, 8, or 12 weeks later, because that's how long it usually takes for you to return back to your initial or competition style of training. So that's why you are kind of taking that risk of, are you actually making progress? And what I have found personally is that sometimes you don't. Sometimes you will run through a 12-week cycle with exercise rotation, going to up to a daily max, doing some bodybuilding work. And then when you go back to the main movement, it's either the same, possibly worse, and if you're lucky, better. But like I said, this is just something that is not to say that it doesn't work. It's just to say that it's hard to recommend it in all circumstances. In the broad sense of things, right? If you were to tell someone, like this is our method to go from point A to point B. If you tell them we are going to, do the 6 to 10 rep range, and once you hit 10 reps, you go up in weight. That is a lot more reliable than if you would just tell them, okay, we're going to try out this movement, this movement, this movement, this movement, go up to a daily max on all of them, and hope by the time we return, you're stronger on it. Depending on the exercises you choose, it might work out that way, but it also depends on the amount of equipment you have and other things that are just a lot more to handle than is necessary, in my opinion. So when you rotate so many exercises and you're not sticking with any exercise for long enough, it might actually do more harm than good. So that's something that you should think about when you are implementing exercise rotation. I'm not saying it's a bad tool, but it needs to be understood so that way it can be applied correctly. So now let's talk about testing versus training your strength. So this is like kind of the difference between a base building phase and a peaking phase. So the question I want to ask you is, what is more productive? So this is going to be from a mathematical perspective. 1 rep for 1 set of 500 pounds, let's say on a deadlift, or 2 sets of 2 reps with 475. It's a 25-pound reduction. I think that's I'm not gonna try the math on that, but if you look at the tonnage you're accumulating, you're comparing 500 pounds versus 1900 pounds. But the thing is, training is not just math and tonnage. The reason why it's okay here to kind of like lay it out this way is because, 475 is probably like, for 2 reps is probably like an RPE 9, whereas 500 might be like RPE 10, like you're no reps left in reserve, but with the 475, you have 1 rep left in reserve, so that's why you're able to train it more and get more tonnage out of it. But it's not like you're doing 100 pounds for 5 reps or 10 reps or 20 reps thinking that that's going to be the same thing. You have to apply hard effort. That's why in the programming series, the first thing that you should consider is consistency and effort. How can you consistently apply effort over time? Sorry, my Asian Tourette's is coming out, I guess. But now let's look at this from the more practical perspective. The reason why I bring up consistency and effort so much is because the longer you can train and accumulate hard work, the better results you'll get in the long term and at the end of the training block. So if you just rush your progression, if you're just constantly lifting heavy, you are lifting heavy but sacrificing future heavy lifts. And that is something that is not worth it in my opinion. It's something that you need to kind of check yourself when it comes to strength training. When you are a strength athlete, when you are strength training, it's very hard for you to think to yourself, I know I can lift this amount of weight. Why am I not lifting it all the time? It's kind of like the beginner trap of, you got so used to adding 5 pounds to the bar every single training week, but then you get to a point where that's no longer an option and you have to start dealing with maybe submaximal loads, percentages, and things of that nature. And you know that you could do more, but you have to apply effort in different ways, and that might draw on you mentally. But the thing is, if you're not able to delay gratification, you're going to sacrifice actual progress, and that is not worth it. So the longer you're able to consistently apply hard effort, the more systems you have in place that facilitates that, the better results you're going to get. So that's why I recommend all programs by their very nature will have some element of linearity. There's no way to get to your goal without that. But I also think that they should involve some amount of undulation and conjugation, meaning a variance in the reps, the volume, the intensity. That's undulation, and conjugation, the variance and rotations of exercises. And we'll talk about that in future videos. So with all this information, how do you actually implement it? The first thing, like I mentioned, all programs are linear in some way. If you want to get from point A to point B, you have to move in a line that gets you there. So whether you use a pure classical linear periodization where volume goes down as intensity goes up, whether you use block periodization, concurrent, conjugate, it doesn't really matter. But at the beginning of the program versus at the end of the program, you will have moved up and forward into a different direction that is more in line with your goals. You will get stronger, you will get bigger, you will have done more volume, you will have accumulated more tonnage. Doesn't matter, all programs are linear in some way. Now, when it comes to actually being implemented into your program, DUP, daily undulating periodization, is useful, and I think it gets kind of like overcomplicated. Really, it's just like, let's say you were like on my Powerbuilding split. It's a strength day and a size day. So let's say on one of them, at most, on the strength days, the highest you'll ever go is the 6 to 10 rep range. But on the size day, the lowest you'll go is the 6 to 10 rep range. And you'll probably be more so in the 8 to 12, 10 to 15 range for most movements. And then conjugation, exercise rotations, exercise variations that are going to build the main lift with less fatigue on the muscles and the soft tissues. If you are not really built for a certain movement, but there is an exercise variation, a very close exercise variation that builds that lift, most of your training should focus on that. The best example would be maybe you are more built for the close grip bench press, and the regular bench press, if you do it too much, produces overuse injuries in you. So in your training, prioritize the close grip, and then when you test your 1 rep max strength, then you can do a peaking cycle with the regular bench press. And then you get your new 1 rep max, and you can go on your merry way. When it comes to exercise variations, I do think that they are very important because they are less fatiguing, but they have such great carryover, and this allows you to get more out of less weight. Now, I know that there's that joke of like, how can more be less? And that's true. That's why I'm saying you are getting more out of less weight, not more from less weight. Or I hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my mind, but whatever. And then the next thing that you can implement within your strength training is to extend the training phase to allow yourself more time to accumulate hard work and tonnage. So let's say you're doing a base building phase. Maybe in the beginning you start out with 3 sets of 10. Then you go into 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 6. Like as the weight gets heavier, right? As volume goes down, intensity goes up. That's classical linear periodization. Or let's say you do a wave, like waves with certain movements. So you do like a more conjugate system where it's like you do 3 weeks with the close grip bench, doing 3 sets of 6 to 10, trying to get 3 sets of 10 on all 3 sets for those 3 weeks. And then the next week you switch to an incline, and then you do board press, floor press. You do these waves with certain movements, and then maybe and I personally find that to be a bit more beneficial if you do if you are inclined to train in a more conjugate fashion, to kind of treat it as waves with a specific movement in place of your strength work. But you do want to extend the amount of time that you're able to actually work hard and accumulate that hard work. And then you go into a peaking phase where you actually get your new 1 rep max. So finally, if you do insist on going to a top set, and some of my programs are programmed like this, in some of my programs I do put like a 5 RM. The thing to keep in mind here is that it's done with technical perfection. Once form breaks down, you're done. You are training to a daily max, and that typically means that there should be an RPE or RIR ceiling, meaning it's not true 1 rep max effort. Matt Winning has a great point of saying, think to yourself, a 9, never a 10. So a 9 out of 10 effort, not a 10 out of 10 effort. That is going to be very productive, and that allows you to keep training for longer. And then in your own training, you want to be thinking to yourself, I'm going to go to a 1 rep max at an RPE 7, meaning I'm going to go to a 1 rep max, but I'm going to make sure that it's the heaviest 1 rep max I can do while still having 3 reps in reserve or 2 reps in reserve. Something of that nature, you know, like you can build up to that heavy top set, but still know that you could have done more and still walk away with a lot of future hard work that you can accomplish because you're not totally burnt out. So this is my recommendations as to why you shouldn't max out very frequently. It contradicts your goal of strength training because, like I said, you need to be able to progress your heavier loads over time. And if you're just lifting the heaviest load you can lift right now, you are losing the ability to lift heavy loads in the future. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you would like coaching or your own personal workout program and training program written by me, you can go to my website at stanstrength.com. We also have apparel. So I'm currently wearing a tank top from my brand. So yeah, I would really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.